All right. Well, that should have given everybody about 5 minutes to get checked in. So that means they're all running late, and y'all were doing really well. So today we're going to take a look at using Retail Pro, accounts receivable, and account link with QuickBooks. So we will start off with what we're going to be covering. We're going to take a look at how to do an AR charge in Retail Pro. We'll look at setting up some system preferences to make sure that it behaves the way you want it to behave for doing AR charges. We'll look at creating a charge. We'll look at creating a payment on account. After we've done that, we will look at going into account link and importing that batch after we've set it up on how to work and how to talk to our QuickBooks. We'll look at how to read a receipt batch, how to post that batch, how to go into QuickBooks and import that batch, and how to apply any payments that you may have received from your Retail Pro. So we'll start out in Retail Pro. We're going to go to Options. We'll go to System Preferences. I'm going to go to Local Preferences. We will go to Point of Sale. Under General Options, we have a setting to limit charge to AR customers only. Would highly recommend that you have that checked. That way you cannot do a charge to a customer unless they are marked as accounts receivable yes or export. When you first set up a customer to work with the accounts receivable, you want to be sure to mark that customer as export. That way when you read your batch in account link, it will bring that customer over and put that customer in your QuickBooks as a customer who is allowed to make charges. Next thing is you want to make sure that you have a fee set up for POA, payment on account, so that when your customer comes in to pay for their outstanding accounts receivable charges, you have a place to apply that payment to. Also, under tenders, we want to be sure that under requirements that you have the charge requirement set to be an active requirement, and that you can use it to make sales. You rarely are going to use it for returning, primarily just for making sales. Also down here under charge requirements is what fields do you need in order to have a valid charge customer. And you can choose any or all that you want. Once you have those settings, you're ready to begin using accounts receivable. So, to use accounts receivable, we're going to run over to Receipts, and we will choose Receipts. And under Receipts, we will look at creating a new receipt. So we'll go to New. We will add an item to our receipt. Once we have our item added, we need to have a customer if we're going to charge this item. So I will go up here and I will add a customer. I can either enter the customer number or I can do a lookup, and I can go choose the customer that is going to make this charge, and I can add the customer to my receipt. I've now got a customer. I've got an item. I can go to tender, and I choose charge. I get the charge pop-up. I can set terms if I wish, or I can if I have default terms set up, or I can come down here and I can enter the terms that I'm giving on this particular charge. So I'm going to put net 30 days. I will say OK, and I will update, or you can update and print. I'm just going to update it, and that will charge that sale to Sean.
Daryl?
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me. I'm sorry. This is Kathy from Capital Sellers. And I was here before it started, and I could see the screen, but now it's just on the home screen. I'm not seeing anything you're doing. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry to interrupt everyone.
No, not a problem. I know what the issue is.
Okay. I know you always do. Oh, there we are. Okay.
It was on my side.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad I chimed in.
I had my screen paused, and I forgot to turn it back on active.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Now I'm in the game.
So I will go back and show you where those system preferences were.
Oh, thank you.
So we will go back to options, system preferences.
Gotcha.
We will go down to local preferences, down to point of sale, to general, and to options. And here is where you set limit charge to AR customers only.
Okay.
Under fees and shipment, here's where you set up that you want to have a fee called POA, payment on account. And then down here under tenders and requirements, it's where you set for the charge account, it can be used for sales, and that I require a first and last name before someone can do a charge.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm with you.
All right. Then we ran off to receipts. We did a new receipt. We added an item to a receipt, which it doesn't matter what order you do it in, except you do have to add a valid number. Go away, 3. So you add a valid number. Then I can pick my customer, or I could enter the customer information. So now I've got my customer added to the receipt. I've met with my requirements of both first and last name. I can go to tender, and I can pay that receipt using a charge. When I do that, if I have default terms set up, I can choose those default terms, or I can come down here and enter the terms I'm going to use for this charge. Okay. Now I can either print an update or just update. So I'm going to update that sale, and I've made that sale to David. All right. Next thing we want to do is we want to make a payment on an account. So I am going to choose a customer, and I'm going to choose Sean. I'm going to come down here to my fee block, and I'm going to add in a payment. And Sean is going to pay this POA, and he's going to pay it with a check. And I'm going to pay it with check number 6558. And OK. And again, I can print an update, or I can simply do an update. And so it's fairly simple once you have it set up to do a charge to a customer or to make a payment for a charge a customer's already made. Once you've done that and you're all done for the day, you can go over into Account Link, and in Account Link, you can read a batch. We're going to read the batch as marked. We're going to read it for today. We're going to put in our start date of today. Our end date is today. We'll say OK. And it's going to go out and it's going to read our batch. And we get the results of the batch. We can see we have some cash of $174. We have a charge. In fact, maybe a couple of charges. We've got some checks. We have our cost of goods sold. We have Visa charges. We have American Express charges. We have our total merchandise sales, our payments on account. We have our inventory value, which you'll notice is also the same as our cost of goods.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our sales tax. And we have the total for our debits and our credits.
And Daryl, the Visa and the American Express is always separated out. You no longer can combine, or can you combine those?
Absolutely can be combined. Absolutely.
Because we switched over and we have one.
It just depends on what your merchant services does. Over here in our account link settings, we first tell it what we're using for accounting. And we've got it all set up for QuickBooks. Then down here under Store Account Manager, we set up where things are going to go to. And down here at the bottom corner, you can tell it you want to see each credit card separately, or you can check off and combine whatever credit cards you want to combine.
Okay, thank you.
You could also combine cash and checks into one number. It's not going to be combined with the credit cards, but it'll be a number for both cash and checks if you desire to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. So now that we've got our batch, here in active batches, it looks good. I want to post it. So I'm going to post it. I choose my posting date. I want to post it by either store or company. You do not want to post by transaction. If you post by transaction, you're going to have 11 separate entries entered into your general journal for that day. A real pain to try to figure out if things are right or wrong. So you want it by store or by company. We say OK. We've posted that batch out of account link. So that created an IIF file that we can run over here to our QuickBooks. In our QuickBooks, we can go up to File, go down to Utilities, go to Import, IIF file, and we're going to see our existing data. If you're not seeing your file that you just read, make sure you're looking in the QB data folder. Now, I have two files here. I've got the one I just did, and I've got an old one. I can take the old one, drag it, put it up here in imported batches to get it out of my way so I don't import it twice, because QuickBooks will let you import a batch twice. I pick up the one from today, I say open, and it imports that batch. This pop-up is due to the fact that I don't have a credit limit set on the customers. If you had a credit limit set on the customer and the charge amount does not exceed that credit limit, this box wouldn't show up. But I kind of like it to show up because it does tell me that I had charges. And I say yes, accept it, and yes, accept it, and OK. Whenever you're bringing in accounts receivable to QuickBooks, it's a good idea to go up here to Chart of Accounts, check your AR clearing. AR clearing should always be 0. If it's not 0, then something did not come over right. What happens in AR clearing is you get a total for your batch. You then get transactions that occurred on that day. You get the sales, you get the payments, and you get the totals. We don't need to record anything because it takes care of itself. But if we had something that we needed to fix, we could then record that change. When you have accounts receivable, it's a good idea to, at least periodically, you don't have to do it every single time, is to go up here to Reports, go down to Customers and Receivables. And I like to go to the Open Invoices report. And that will show you all of the invoices you have that are currently open. You can see the balance for each customer. And you can then apply payments to that customer. The payments are negative, the charges are positive. If you double click on an invoice, you can go up to Apply Credits, tell it, I want to apply that credit to that customer. And you can say, Done. It'll mark it as paid. You can say Save and Close. And that goes away. I still have some credits. Yes.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask this question or not, and I don't know how many people are listening, and maybe you'll address it later, but what's appropriate and inappropriate about not applying charges? Say, and I'll give you an example. If your books have been closed out and you've written some things off and you haven't applied credits or payments, I'm sorry, in a very long time. I go back to the days when we had our, before you were there. Yeah. Yes, and I can't even remember her name. And
Jamie up.
Yes, thank you. And I don't know why, but we've had it since 2003, and we haven't applied payments in all that time. So
the problem with not applying the payments is that if you run a report for past due for aging,
right,
it will show them as past due, even though you've got the payment that covers it. It'll show as past due if the payment hadn't been applied to the bill.
Right. So that's why these things keep coming back up after we think we've cleared them out.
Right.
And they'll come back.
It's a good idea to go in and apply those credits every once in a while and just get them cleared out.
Okay, well then I'll talk to you privately and you can help, we'll see where we can start, because we're, 14, 15 years.
Sounds like a lot of fun to me.
Yeah, it does. I know I'm going to have to hire somebody to do that. Maybe you. No, that's beyond
so then you just go through and check them off. And apply the payments. If you happen to have one that matches more or less, or only one to choose from, it'll check it automatically. And we can see that we got Sean down to where he only owes 56 cents, and David owes the 172.32. We can also see that if we go look at the customer accounts, and we look at the account record, we can see those accounts. I like to add another field over here, and I like to add a field for open balance. And what that does, it allows you to see if a bill has been taken care of, it zeros. If it's still outstanding, it leaves a number over there. All right. Any questions there?
Am I the only one here?
I don't think so. At least you weren't a little earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, we got two other folks there.
Okay, good. I'll stop talking.
So, anybody else? Jeremy, you had a question.
No, I was just voicing my attendance.
Okay. I saw the question mark over there. All right. So, it's really pretty simple. There's not a whole lot to it. Important thing is to make sure that you check that AR clearing and make sure that it is zero. Because if it's not zero, then we need to go in and figure out what didn't come over and why didn't it come over. If you're doing accounts payable with Account Link, it's even more important to check that. and make sure that the AP clearing is 0. Because if it's not 0, it is a real pain to fix it in accounts payable after the fact. Accounts receivable is not so bad, because generally with accounts receivable, you're reading one day at a time, and so everything stays nice and neat. It all happened on one day. Any errors you've got are going to be on that one day. With accounts payable, you may be reading a month or more at a time, and therefore it gets to be a real pain to fix it, and sometimes things overlap a lot. They're not nice and neat like accounts receivable is. Because with accounts payable, it doesn't come over to be paid until you have a vendor invoice number and date in the voucher in Retail Pro, and some vendors are a little lazy at sending out those vouchers, and so it can really make it fun to keep AP clearing squared up if you don't stay right on top of that one. All right, so if no one has any questions, that's all I've got for you today. If you do have anything, you can feel free to give me a call afterward, and we can answer any specific questions you want to go over. So our number is 916-368-1070, or you can drop me a note at Darrell F., that is DARRELLF like Frank, at BigHairyDog.com. And I'll be glad to answer your email or give you a call and talk to you on the phone.
Darrell, I don't know how many, Jeremy and who else is listening has, how long they've been using your system, but maybe you could go over, because I've had this experience with the vendor vouchers or receipts or invoices not coming over, and that's my past experience. You're so right that I think if you can do it more often, stay on top of it. But if it's lacking an invoice number, it's not going to come over. If it's lacking a voucher number, it's not going to come over. If it's lacking a date or any of that, maybe you can go over that to make sure that.
Or if terms are prepaid or COD, AP vouchers won't come over either.
Right. Okay. So that's a new one. I mean, I didn't know about the COD, which we don't have anything, but
right. Yeah.
COD
is not so common, but some people stick prepaid because they paid the vendor with a credit card.
Oh, and
then it never comes over and shows up. Then it never shows up.
Oh, okay. Well, that's new news to me.
Yeah.
That's good.
It doesn't show up as an error. It just doesn't show up, period.
Up at all. Yeah.
Because it's ignored.
Okay.
Good. The most common errors are, one, the vendor or customer are not marked as export when you first create a new one.
Okay.
Or if you modify or alter one, you need to make sure that they're marked as AR or AP export so that it sends those changes over to your QuickBooks. Otherwise, it may have changed in Retail Pro, but if it may not match then exactly what's in QuickBooks, and it won't find that customer or vendor, and you're going to get an error.
And that's true. Yeah, that's important, because if you change it, like you said, a phone number, a name, a zip code, anything, in whether it be the vendor or the customer, and don't go to send it to export, it's not going to come over, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And so that's really important. When you make a new vendor, vendors are automatically marked as export. They're not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
When unless you change something in the vendor after you created it.
Mm-hmm.
Customers are automatically marked as no, that they are not accounts receivable.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't mark them as export for accounts receivable, it doesn't send them over to QuickBooks. So that when you try to read that batch, they're not going to be there, and you're going to get an error, and you're going to have an AR clearing balance because it didn't zero it back out.
Right. So I don't know if anybody else is interested in this, but I wanted to ask. So those are some of the basic things, and you would probably go to Retail Pro first if you had something that didn't come over, or you have I had recently a batch. I don't know where it went. It was in didn't even make it to the length, but I saw in Retail Pro, it had been exported, but I couldn't find it in the link, and I couldn't find it in QuickBooks because I've seen it before where I made a mistake and when I didn't open it up and went ahead and stored it in, you know, the folder. So you can go back and you can look for it, but I don't know what happened. Looks in Retail Pro, it exported, but it's not in the link. So go ahead.
A common issue that can happen there is that somehow when you go to open your import, it is not pointing to that QB data folder.
Okay, yeah.
If that's something to make sure you look up there and see it is pointing to QB data, because if it's not, and it's pointing off somewhere else, you're never going to find your batch.
Well, that's it, and I did research. I did go through the whole. You actually helped me on this a few years ago, and we were able to go back and unimport the batch out of Retail Pro, and I can't figure out how to do that now. So in other words, we would pull up the receipt window, and there used to be a little 2 boxes on the receipt window that said, general ledger or accounts receivable, and you could go and you could uncheck them. And I'm not able to find that anymore, because then you could, rather than deleting the batch because the batch wasn't there, I couldn't unmark it and delete it. So you could go back to Retail Pro and unmark it there, but I can't find that now. Okay.
There's the GL AR marks.
Right.
Yeah. Everything that has been read is going to have a GL mark.
Right, right.
If it's accounts receivable, it should also have an accounts receivable.
Right.
If it is an accounts receivable and doesn't have both marks, that explains why your AR clearing is not 0. Because it didn't read over the accounts receivable portion.
Okay, so
yes, you should have
am I boring everybody else? I'm sorry, but I was looking at my computer because I'm listening to you on my iPad. So how did you get to this window right here that you're looking at? Is there?
It's just receipts and in the form view.
Okay, receipts. Got it.
This is So receipts, form view, and you should see those marks.
Gotcha. Okay.
If you don't see the marks, you can right-click up here on the header bar.
Okay.
Go to Interface, Page Manager, and then scroll down here through the list and find the GL and accounts receivable so that you can double-click, move them up here, and then apply them to your columns.
Great. Thank you.
And
I do have a question too.
Yes.
Were you going to show like if a batch doesn't come out right, like kind of how it needs to be fixed?
It depends on exactly what happened.
Okay.
And let's see, if I go up here and I make a sale, and I make a sale to John Blue here. And if I try to charge that to John Blue, he's not marked as an accounts receivable customer, so you won't let me charge it because I marked that error in settings. But if I go over here to John, and I mark John as AR yes, like everybody else, who ate my save button? Okay. And so now if I go over and I make a sale, and I make a sale to John, Now it's going to let me charge it just fine because John's marked as a charged customer. And I can save, print it. Everything looks perfectly well, except when I go over here to Account Link and I go to read that in, it's going to read it. Everything looks balanced. Everything looks perfectly fine. I post it. Everything looks good there. But when I go over to accounting and I go to read that in, then I'm going to have an issue. My issue is going to be when I look over here at AR clearing, it shouldn't have been 0 because it shouldn't have let John go in so smoothly. I hate it when it does that.
Me too.
Because he was marked yes, it shouldn't have added him to accounting as an accounts receivable customer. He should need to be marked export. So I don't know why it added him. I am baffled. But it brought it over and it came over fine. But what you would do if it didn't come over is I would compare what did come over to my batch, to my batch in Account Link. I can go to List View and I can see each transaction. I always like to look at them in AR. I can see the transaction. I can see how much it was for. I can see who it was to. And if it's not there and matching up to what I have over here in QuickBooks, then that's an issue.
Yeah, so how would you,
Thing,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
How would you fix it? The way I would generally fix it is it's generally going to be something that happened on the Retail Pro side, like the customer was not marked as export. So I would go in, mark the customer as export, reread that batch. And in rereading that batch, it would generate that customer as an accounts receivable customer, and it would send them over to QuickBooks, and it would reread the AR portion of that sale. So let's see if we can make that happen by going back over here to Retail Pro and adding a new customer. No, get out of there. And I'll come down here and I will mark him as yes instead of export. And we'll say save. And then we will go make a sale. And we'll go tend to that as a charge. And we'll save it. go over to account link. We will read that. It reads there. We post it. Go over to QuickBooks, and hopefully that won't mess up. Stupid computer, you're not supposed to do that. And it dropped him in too as a new AR customer.
So would you do the same, go through the same process, Daryl? I have a couple of customers, a few that come in a lot, and they've been shopping for a long time. And when I export it, the amount will come over, but it's not associated with an account. In other words, the amount will be there, but it won't have their name on the account.
And that's generally because they're not marked as accounts receivable.
But yet I've had the guy could come in, they can come in 1 week and everything exports fine, and other times it doesn't.
That's pretty weird.
Yeah. I probably need to call you and have you look at stuff.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm not going to mark her as AR. I know I can create an error then. And we go over here and we make a sale. Actually, I didn't want to make a sale. I lied. I want to make a payment. And we'll make it in cash. Well, let me update it. No problem at all. But now when I try to import that, now that's where I've got no customer.
Mm-hmm.
I've got no accounts receivable amount. But in Form View, I've got my $150 cash, and it's a POA.
Mm-hmm.
So when I post it, and I try to import it into my QuickBooks, my data was imported,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not zero.
Mm-hmm.
Because it brought in the accounts receivable amount, but it doesn't have an account to offset it to zero it back out. And in that case, to fix that, that's when I would go back over to Retail Pro. I would go find my customer. And I would mark her as export. I don't need to do anything else in Retail Pro because her transaction is completed.
Mm-hmm.
But in Account Link, I would reread and it's going to bring over just the accounts receivable part.
Oh, and so you wouldn't have to unmark and delete that batch. You just reread it. You read it again. I
Right.
see. Because you did the dash one. Okay.
Right. So we made our export. Now we can see over here, it's got our name attached to it. Everything's good. So that when I post it, and we go over here to QuickBooks and we import it, what are you complaining about? I hate it when it does that. So it said error line 6.
Yeah.
That means there's something it didn't like.
Right.
So I would go to here. I would go find my QB data folder. I would find that batch. I would right click on it. I would open it with Excel. You can open it with Notepad if you don't have Excel, but Excel is so much easier to read. And it brings it in and shows me what I have. And it says error line 6, which means it's in this group right here. And that should have read over just fine, because that batch looks perfectly fine. However, I don't see the part I would expect to see there, which is where it brings over her main information.
Mm-hmm.
So over here in account link, I can go here and tell it to update customers. It will look for any customers who are marked as export, because for some reason that is really weird. The yeses came over, the exports didn't. And then over here, I would do a file utility import, IIF file. And I've got one here called customers. I would open that up. And it's a duplicate name. That's caused because when it couldn't find the name, it put it here in my other names list.
Hmm.
And so there's her name there. So I would come in here and I would delete her out of here. Now when I import that customer list, it won't complain. And now when I import, get back over there, that IIF file, it'll drop in her payment and it zeroes us out.
Holy moly! Is there a shorter way to do that?
Not
Because
really.
that's the very problem I've had. But I will call you and we can look at it and see why it seems to be chronic. With we have 4 or 5 customers that happens every now and then, like about every couple of months. Okay.
And so it's just kind of go through and make sure everything matches up correctly.
Okay.
If it doesn't, you try to figure out what didn't match up and why.
Mm-hmm.
And like in that one, for some weird reason, even marked export, it didn't send it over like it should have. It read the batch correctly with the right information, it didn't send it over.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were marked yes, for some weird reason, it sent them over, even though it shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
I expect to get that error on the last one when I did Bob Jones.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But that's kind of the way you go through and troubleshoot what can go wrong, because it usually has something to do with the customer and the way the customer is or isn't in QuickBooks not matching perfectly the way they are or aren't in Retail Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what usually causes the errors and causes them to be unbalanced. The same basic thing applies to accounts payable. In accounts payable, it's either the customer doesn't match or the vendor doesn't match, or the voucher didn't have both an invoice number and an invoice date and had terms that were prepaid or COD, so it didn't come over right. Or on vouchers, there's a payee code, and every now and again, Retail Pro hiccups, and it doesn't fill in the payee name and the payee.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, it won't come over, and you'll be off. Your AP claim won't match because it didn't have a name in the payee. In that case, you would edit that transaction, and it will let you enter the payee, and then you would reread it, and everything would come over fine.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Is anybody else interested in merging accounts in Retail Pro if you have, so we've had employees that will enter, we have a customer might be in there 3 times because they've misspelled their name or they hadn't capitalized. And I know you can merge in QuickBooks. In Retail Pro, are we able to merge, or do you have to deactivate?
It has to do with using the Technician's Toolkit.
Okay. Okay.
So it can be done.
Okay.
It's not as easy as it is in QuickBooks.
No. So we can talk about it another time then. Okay.
Right. So anything else?
I don't have anything. Is anybody else? Sounds like I took over, Daryl. Sorry.
Yeah. They're all still here, though.
Okay. All righty.
All right. So since I don't hear anything, we will wrap it up there. And like I said, if you have any questions, just give us a call or drop me a note, and we'll see if we can't get them solved for you.
All right.
Everybody
Thank you.
have a great one. All right.
Thank
Talk
you.
to y'all later.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.